represented a tremendous amount of technical skill with film. He had to edit it by hand and also had to be able to choreograph himself with the projection. So he would do one take and then project it to the next take, record both, and then record to the next. Much as later composers like Steve Reich would do with tape loops and editing this kind of minimalist take on New York life. So the interesting thing for me at looking at 1900 to 2008 is we've had a century of this kind of manipulation of recording. And Rebirth of a Nation for me was a really fascinating prism to view how people looked at the idea of the definition of identity and its relationship to kinds of production processes. Griffith really was the first major Hollywood mogul. He invented the close-up, for example. He also invented the whole idea of how to have multiple stories at the same time. So those are things that are really dynamic interventions in film. But unlike Méliès or my other filmmaker, Orson Welles, he took things in a much more toxic direction. So I want to play a quick trailer of the film, and then how are we for time?
We're out of time already. It's 10 minutes ago.
Really? Wow, time is flying. Wow. Okay, so Rebirth of a Nation, 1915 to 2008. I want you to just watch this and think about how history was defined in the 20th century and how we play with the fragments of that as a kind of a repurposing and a renewal of history. So let's do this and...
Smoke?
Oh, thank you.
Is that D.W. Griffith? Yes. He made The Birth of a Nation.
Now I want to ask you a question.
Fire ahead.
When you made The Birth of a Nation, you feel as though it were true?
The plan at that time was needed and served the purpose. Yes, I think it's true.
President Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States, the son of Confederate sympathizers, struggles with an escalating war in Europe. A woman's right to vote, and a country still recovering from a devastating civil war. While in the throes of his attempt to create the League of Nations in 1915, Woodrow Wilson saw a very different vision for the internal political situation in America than he did with his international idealism. The League of Nations was an attempt to foster what he called an organization to end all wars. To premiere his vision, he invited his close friend and fellow Confederate son D.W. Griffith to screen The Birth of a Nation at the White House, making it the first film to play there in American history. The Birth of a Nation set the tone for how film portrayed history. It still fuels the debate about how much progress has or hasn't occurred, its impact on society, and whether such a film should have ever been made. In modern 21st century America, a world of red states and blue states, The Birth of a Nation hangs as a specter over the political process. Ultimately, The Birth of a Nation is about conflict. It shows us controversy and a deep ignorance of history in the form of a film once described by Woodrow Wilson as writing history with lightning. There was something in the tradition of America's first pop culture phenomenon, the minstrel show, showing multiple ideas about American identity, and set the tone for the 21st century's revisionist landscape, where media in the absence or presence of a story in that media could set off a war, or could literally create a vision of democracy rising in the deserts of another foreign occupied nation. The Rebirth of a Nation looks at Griffith's vision of America tied together with never-before-seen close-ups and innovative techniques, and turns them on themselves to make a film from the viewpoint of DJ culture. The turntable moves to become the projector becomes the multimedia file, and all of those things look back through history as a digital media where stories can be made as we go. The Rebirth of a Nation is a DJ mix applied to cinema. It's been said that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. But what happens if we break the cycle?
What has Pontius Pilate said? Truth? What is the truth?
End with Griffith talking about truth, what is the truth? And it was a film that was really set the tone for how people portrayed this idea of documentary realism. So realism after this film was something that was under duress. People really felt that the film was a true story, and it actually increased KKK recruitment. And it's a very weird story because with DJ culture, I know a lot of other DJs, so there's, say for example, you guys have heard of Grandmaster Flash or Grand Wizard Theodore, and they're both associates of mine. I was like, you guys, did you know your titles are also KKK titles? So, so it's one thing to be a Grandmaster in like, Kentucky, and another to be a Grandmaster in South Bronx. Let's put it that way. So what ends up happening is this kind of hybridity and the unconscious connections linking these kind of global networks of both film, digital media, and music have really changed the way people look at cultural production overall. And that's what I'm kind of going to wrap up with is, not only is this something about asking questions of material to be updated and changed and transformed, and actually encouraging people to participate in the media that they live in, but also to question the variability of digital media control mechanisms. Why people are forced to actually look at the update or the Microsoft or any of this kind of crap and think about more open source approaches to the networks that we all use and create from. So I like to think of the film as an open source media project. Part of it's going to be related to the whole Creative Commons, Lawrence Lessig situation with film, and I'm working with the producers of The Simpsons for that. And the Antarctica project is going to be touring mainly large-scale opera houses, starting at the Spoleto Opera Festival. So if you saw anything or are into some of the examples, there's plenty more. I had a film of John Cage I was going to show, but I know we got a time crunch. And the idea here is that hip-hop and techno and drum and bass and all these musical styles are just as much an art form based on montage and collage as certain early notions of film and multimedia. So whether it's the 70s and 80s, or whether it's the turn of the last century, collage has become the hidden vocabulary of digital culture. And I want to kind of end with you guys invoking that with all the CDs that we're given. They're meant to be exchanged and traded, and nothing is meant to be the same. In fact, I encourage everyone to think about it as a remix lecture. So, thanks. And can we get lights?
Paul becomes more a professor every year, Professor Miller. One day he's no longer the kid, Herr Professor Miller. Yeah, you gave us, I think, less examples, but more structure in theoretical things, and I think that is exactly what this evening should be about. You are a hybrid still, and that you are proud of that. That's certainly no problem. So, I have personally just to say, I learned something, thank you. And the only problem I probably would have is with the fragment and the whole thing. We lose something if we give up the idea of the whole. You see, as Adorno was opposed to the whole as you are, obviously, but still he understood that there is a promise hidden, which only in art can be hinted at.
I agree, but Adorno hated jazz.
Yeah, I know. But he understood more of experimental music that you might have.
No, I'd be happy to.
Alban Berg. Also, we have all our blind sides, maybe. And
I like Charlie Parker.
Right. No, I like that. Everybody knows that. But as you know, maybe it's because he was so attracted by the seriousness of this. Alban Berg, and he was a trained composer, as you know.